Hello, everyone. Let's discuss this question from the paper October-November 2023, variant 1-2. Now, if we have a look at this question, that is question number 2 that we've had, the question reads, explain two features of positivist approach to sociological research. Explain two features of the positivist approach to sociological research. Now, before I even begin, how important is it for us to know what positivism is and how different is positivism from interpretivism? Now, remember, if you are attempting question number 5, that is the 26 marker evaluative essay question that you get on research methodology, there are 90% chances, even more, that you would have to write down about positivism and interpretivism. It is pretty important that you understand what positivism and interpretivism is. Now, if we speak about positivism, what is positivism? Positivism, the idea of positivism was put forward by Auguste Comte. What are the features of this positivist approach, or what is it that you all need to keep in mind related to positivism? Now, the question over here, like I said, reads, explain two features of the positivist approach. Now, if we have a look at the marking scheme, there are multiple, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 features that we have written over here. By going through this question, by trying to attempt this question, by understanding this question, you not only learn how to attempt this question, this specific question, but you'd also understand and learn what positivism is, and you'd hopefully learn how to put positivism to use when you're attempting any other question on research methodology too. Over here, I'm referring to the 26 marker evaluative essay questions. Now, number one, positivists believe that scientific researchers, positivists believe that the methods that are used in natural sciences should be used for a sociological research as well. I'll say that again. According to positivism, according to the positivist approach, the methods that are used by natural scientists, or the methods that are used by natural sciences, should also be used in sociology. Now, what are the methods that are used in natural sciences? Or to begin with, what even is natural sciences, right? When you talk about sciences, we're talking about physics, chemistry, math, right? So the methods that are used in natural sciences, according to positivists, should also be used in sociology, the first feature. Number one. Number two, positivists believe that quantitative data should be gathered. According to positivists, they highly advocate, they highly support the idea of using quantitative data or collecting data through quantitative means. Quantitative means on numeric data, right? Number three, according to positivists, we should study the social world in terms of laws of cause and effect, or in other words, a causal effect, right? Now, according to the positivist approach, just like they do it in natural sciences, right? Remember, two molecules of hydrogen and oxygen together makes it H2O, right? Causal relationship. What is the cause and effect relationship? So according to the positivist approach, now this third point, the third point that I just highlighted in green, this is pretty much in line with the first point. When you say according to positivists, the social world, right, in society, the social world should be studied in terms of the laws of cause and effect, right? Just like you have cause and effect relationships, just like you study causal relationships in natural sciences, so should be the case with sociology, right? So positivists strongly advocate the idea of using natural science methods. Positivists believe that the social world should be studied in terms of the laws that are used, the cause and effect laws that are used in natural sciences. Now, number four, according to the positivist approach, using research questions should be used to test and then retest hypotheses. Research questions should be used to test and retest hypothesis. I'm sure we all know what a hypothesis is. A hypothesis is a testable theory. The word hypothesis over here refers to multiple hypotheses, right? So according to the positivist research, or according to the positivist approach, use research questions that are used by natural scientists to be able to test and then retest the hypothesis you have. The next point, collecting data that enables comparisons across group and over time, which would help you form patterns and trends too. Now, if you talk about, if now this point, this point, I believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This fifth point is in line with the second point, right? Where you said use of quantitative data, right? Now, according to this fifth point, when you're collecting data, when you're collecting numeric data, right? Numerical data or quantitative data always makes it easier for you to make comparisons. Now, for instance, if I may give you an example, your scores, your score in your let's just say uh test in a particular month. Let's just say you had a test in January, you get your scores for that, you get the result for that. What are the percentages? You could compare it with the percentage in that you scored in February. You could compare that with the percentage you scored in March. So numerical data, quantitative data always makes it easier for you to make comparisons, right? So collecting data that enables comparisons across different social groups, right? Across different social groups. Let's just say students studying for sociology in one particular college compared to students studying sociology at another particular college, right? Now, this is just one example, and there could be many others. Collecting data that enables comparisons across groups and over time, right? If you are able to make comparisons over time, don't you think that would help you identify patterns? For instance, let's uh, walk ourselves out of the sociology students example. If I talk about unemployment rate, if I talk about crime rate, right? These are the things that sociologists do study, right? Collecting data, or for the matter of fact, suicide rates, right? Collecting data that enables comparisons across different groups over time, which would help you identify patterns, that would help you identify trends or predict trends, let's say. Now, taking this ahead, moving on, positivists focus on gaining data that is high in reliability. Again, this goes pretty much in line with the second point over here. Okay, I should use the same theme. Okay, yeah. Now, again, this goes with the second point. If you talk about collecting quantitative data, if you talk about collecting numerical data or numbers, right? It's easier. They say quantitative data has more chances of being reliable. Quantitative data has more chance of being reliable. Or in other words, numerical data that you have, for instance, if I talk about pens, I have 4 pens in my hand. There are, yeah, two blue and two red, right? If I have 4 pens in my hand, this is quantitative data, right? If I count, they'd be four. If someone else counts, they'd still be four. If a third person counts, they'd still be four. So quantifiable data is seen to be more reliable, right? Now, for this, we need to remind ourselves what reliability is. A reliable research is a research that is conducted more than once and you come up with the same conclusion. A research that is conducted more than once and you come up with the same conclusion, or in other words, when the results are consistent, when there's consistency in terms of results. So numerical data, right? Now, counting this, I could count this, someone else could count this, a third person could count this, a fourth person would count this. As long as we know how to count, the answer, the final result would always be the same. However, if you compare it with qualitative research, right? If you talk about describing this particular pen, or if you talk about experience with this particular pen, if there are three different people describing, or if there are three different people trying to put their experience with this particular pen into words, do you think the experience that I would have would be similar to the experience the second person would have, or for the third person, do you think it would be the same? So when you talk about a comparison, if you talk about a comparison between quantitative and qualitative data, quantitative data, they say, is high in terms of reliability. So positivists focus on gaining data. Positivists focus on gaining data that is high in terms of reliability. Taking this ahead, the use of large research populations to produce representative data results. Now, again, if you are collecting data that is numerical, if you're collecting quantitative data, you could actually collect that data through a large group as compared to you wanting to collect data that is qualitative. Now, if I may give you an example, uh, questionnaires or if I talk about close-ended questionnaires or questionnaires that, to make it simpler, that are based on multiple choice questions, right? Now, if you're collecting data through questionnaires, don't you think you could, let's say, collect data from 1,000 people in a day? If you have 1,000 questionnaires, if you have 1,000 questionnaires printed out, you could distribute them. Let's just say you're a bunch of friends, you're a bunch of 5 friends, you You all, I mean, each one of you takes 200 questionnaires, goes to different locations, and you'd probably be able to get those questionnaires filled in a lesser amount of time as compared to you wanting to collect data through an interview. Let's just say an unstructured interview. An unstructured interview is an example of qualitative data, right? So the use of large sorry, the use of large research populations to produce representative results. Now, an advantage of quantitative data is because an advantage of quantitative data is that you can collect data from a larger population, right? So the larger population you're collecting data from, the more likely the chances are that your findings would be generalizable, right? So the more people you collect data from, the more confident you'd feel that you could apply the findings on a wider group, on a larger population. The next point, objective approach to research. Now, according to positivists, now let's link this point to the first point. According to positivists focus on, or positivists emphasize that data should be collected in an objective manner. What does the word objective mean? Objective is without bias, right? Now, these are a couple of features. I believe there's 6 or 7 or 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 features about positivism. Amongst these 8 features, you could write any two, or if there's any other feature beyond this, or that is not present in this list, you could write that as well. Now, another important thing for these questions, especially what kids do is, what many students do is, they'd simply start explaining the first point that they come across, or they'd start off with a point that apparently appeared to be easy to them. Now, a point is only easy when you know it is fitting the criteria to give you full marks, right? So if you have 8 points over here, you have a look at this criteria. This is the criteria. I'll just highlight it for you. This. If after reading these 4 points, I'll just number this 1, 2, 3, 4, right? 4 marks for the first 6 point being explained, 4 marks for the second point being explained. So how do you get marks over here? You get the first mark for making a point or giving a characteristic. You get the second mark for explaining that particular point. You get the third mark for selecting relevant sociological material. You get the fourth point mark for explaining how the material supports the point, right? Now, a point should be picked up from here or beyond this list only when you know you can fit in, or only when you know you're confident that only when you're confident that you can cater to all 4 of these requirements, right? Do not just use the first point that you come across. Do not just use any point that comes in your mind. So taking this ahead, if I may use this example, for example, positivists advocate the usage of scientific approach. They believe that sociologists should use a similar approach as the natural sciences, like I said. This allows them to gain an objective understanding. Now, this word objective over here is the sociological material. And natural scientists believe you should study phenomenon without influencing it. Now, you're again explaining, further explaining objectivity. Now, natural sciences, or the usage of natural science methods in sociological research, this has been a very popular topic. If I talk about the questions that we've had in CIs in the last 15 years. I have a video uploaded on this. You might as well would want to watch that. That has been a very popular topic. If you want to, if you still do not know that particular topic, if you still don't feel confident about it, I'll advise you go through it. Now, the next question, that is 2B, having a look at this question. The question over here reads, explain 2 limitations of structured interview. Explain 2 limitations of a structured interview as a research method. Now, again, for this, we need to know what a structured interview is. A structured interview, we use a structured interview for an interview that has questions written down. I mean, if I'm a researcher, I have a list of questions listed down in front of me. If I use the same questions for all the participants that I plan on interviewing, we refer to that as a structured interview. Structured interviews are not flexible because it's the same questions that have to be asked in the same pattern, same questions, same pattern, standardized. They're more standardized, right? So structured interviews could also be seen as verbal questionnaires. So Questionnaires, why? Because you have a list of questions written down in front of you. Verbal, because you're asking questions and expecting the respondent to speak. Now, two limitations of a structured interview as a research method. To begin with, number one, questions with limited options to choose from. Now, if you are using questions that have or that give the participant very limited amount of options to choose from, that would be seen as a disadvantage, right? Now, now you, when you're writing this point, you are comparing it with an unstructured interview. An unstructured interview is when you do not have questions listed down in front of you, and you as a researcher, you put up a topic and then you expect the respondent to speak, or you expect the interviewee to speak, right? In an interview, the person who's asking questions is an interviewer, and the person who's responding is an interviewee. Now, the first disadvantage. The second disadvantage or limitation that you could possibly use over here is the interviewer effect, right? The interview effect, of course, if the interview. Now, if I talk about a comparison between data being collected through a questionnaire versus data being collected through an interview. Of course, if there's an interview, you the presence of another human in front of you might as well affect the responses that you give. So interviewer effect is a disadvantage. Number three, different interviewers may produce different interviewers may produce variations in response depending on the interviewer's characteristic. Now, different interviewers may produce variations in response. Different interviewers may produce variations in response. Now, let's just say there are 100 people that need to be interviewed. Let's go easy on ourselves. If let's just say there are 10 people that need to be interviewed, and there are two interviewers that would be conducting these interviews. Interviewer number one is a male, interviewer number two is a female, right? Being a male or female, this is just one characteristic. There are many other characteristics of the interviewer that could affect the responses of the interviewee. The social class amongst these characteristics could be your social class, your gender, your ethnicity, your education, your background, your religion, your political predisposition, if that works. So yeah, these are some characteristics of the interviewer, right, that might affect the responses that are received, right? There's a possibility that the interviewee might feel very intimidated, right? So for to keep it simple, if there are 5 people who've been interviewed by a male, and there are 5 people as in 5 interviewees or 5 respondents that are being interviewed by a female, don't you think there's a possibility that because of the differences in the characteristics of the interviewers, the responses generated might end up being different? So different interviewers may produce variations in response depending on the interviewer's characteristics. Number four, limited scope for the interviewer to clarify and explain questions. Minded, we're talking about a structured interview. I had mentioned this earlier. Structured interviews are known not to be flexible. They're known not to be flexible, right? So there's a possibility, because we're talking about the interviewer is a human, the interviewee is a human. There's a possibility that the interviewee might not understand the question that is being asked from him or her, right? In that case, there's always a possibility that in that case, there's always a possibility that because of misinterpretation of the question asked by the interviewer from the interviewee, the interview might end up giving an incorrect response. So there being a limited scope for the interviewer to clarify and explain questions, right? Because why is it that we're saying that the scope is limited? Because it is a structured interview, and a structured interview is not flexible. The next point over here, unable to understand issues in depth, right? Again, structured interviews, they typically uh, have questions that do not allow the respondent to give answers in depth, which again could be seen as a disadvantage. There's less opportunity for respondents to qualify and explain their answers. Now, these points, they pretty much overlap too. And because of lack of flexibility, the respondent might not feel at ease and might not want to add up something that the respondent felt like should have been mentioned, should have been a part of this interview? I mean, when you're a respondent, when you're an interviewee, and especially in the case of a structured interview, you end up answering questions according to the question that has been asked to you, right? If you feel additionally there should be something else that should be added uh, to the response as well, you might not feel very confident about it because of the nature of a structured interview, because structured interviews, they lack flexibility, right? It's the same questions being asked in the same order from all the respondents. The next point that we have over here, a practical limitation, is the cost. For example, you need to train interviewers as compared to a questionnaire, the amount of time that is required. I think I mentioned this earlier in this very video, that if you talk about a comparison between an interview and a questionnaire, in an interview usually takes more time, right? Interviews usually take more time. If there are 10 people that need to be interviewed, if I stick to the example that I was just giving, if there are 10 people that need to be interviewed and there are two interviewers, they might, even if they're spending 10 minutes with one person, that would take good about an hour, right? On the other hand, if you talk about distributing 10 questionnaires to respondents, they might be able to wrap it up in the next 10 minutes. So yeah, practical issues such as training interviews is costly, training interviews is a hassle, it is a demanding job. At the same time, another practical issue would be the time that is spent too. So you could use any other limitations as well, reward a maximum of 2 limitations. What is the criteria to score? Full, this is the criteria. Here you go for a 6 marker. Since there are 2 limitations that you've been asked for, you expect to grab 3 marks for each. This is an example of how you could possibly do that. If you're using the point, there are limited options to choose from because the interview schedule is pre-coded, meaning there is no opportunity for respondents to provide alternative answers. This may impact on the validity of the data that is being produced. So again, the sociological material over here is this word pre-coded. Now, I hope this has helped. Thank you.